everyone. I'm Dr. Yosefa Fogel-Rubel, and this is One-on-One Women Talk Torah, a series brought to you by Matan Women's Institute for Torah Study. Welcome back to Matan's One-on-One podcast. If you would like to sponsor a podcast episode in honor or memory of a loved one, please contact the Matan office via telephone or email us at podcast@matan.org.il. Each week we spend 30 minutes speaking about a seminal figure or idea in that week's Parsha. Parshat Maseh opens with a list of the nation's traveling landmarks and their wilderness wanderings. Aaron dies in this week's Parsha and war is fought with Arad. The latter section of the Parsha details laws pertaining to entry and conquest of Israel, such as the commandments to inhabit the land, the borders of Canaan, another commandment to create Levitic cities and cities of refuge, and concludes with the legal application of Tzlofchad's daughter's inheritance. The Parsha continues essentially with its opening tone. It is one filled with transition from one generation to the next, and with laws that will help the nation transition into their new life in Israel. Today I have the pleasure of welcoming back Rabbanit Yafit Clymer, who is a senior lecturer in Judaic studies at several Matan branches at Emunah and Web Yeshiva. Yafit is on Beit Hillel's advisory board and writes online responsa for the Meshivat Nefesh project. Rabbanit Yafit, it is a pleasure to have you back here.
Thank you, Yosefa. It's good to be here again.
And, last time we spoke philosophy. We spoke about Franz Rosenzweig's The Star of Redemption. And today you're also going to bring us something that's different, to take us into the world of Chassidut, into the world of the Baal Shem Tov. So I'm going to put that ball in your court. It is far more yours than mine. So let's start. Who was the Baal Shem Tov? Tell us about him.
Well, the truth is that basically he's a very enigmatic figure. There's not a lot of details that we know of him and of his life, but throughout the years, both through the stories about him and through some writings that we have of his students, we know something about what he was doing and what he was trying to bring to the Jewish world. And I think we have to speak 2 minutes history, Jewish history here, because what Chassidut came to the world at the 18th century, in the mid of the 18th century, in what today is Western Ukraine, and it was based upon the personality of the Baal Shem Tov. Jewish life in those areas before were very, I would use a very harsh word, was very rigid religiously. And Torah was learned only by the few Talmidei Chachamim in each town, in each village, in each city. And most of the Jewish people, the common Jewish people, they didn't know much about Judaism. And what the Baal Shem Tov is doing, like Rabbi Israel of the good name, he's actually starting a spiritual and social movement. It's very important to say that it was also a social movement, because what he said was Torah belongs to everybody. And even if you don't know how to read, you can be a good Jew and God loves you as you are. And his influence throughout his teachings, spread throughout the Ashkenazi Jewish world when it started, both Eastern Europe and Russia. Even though today the influence of Chassidut is upon the entire Jewish world, also the Sephardi world. But back then at the 18th century, Baal Shem Tov comes with few main ideas that he is teaching his students and the Jewish world. One is to say that God's presence is everywhere. It's in the entire universe, and we can cling to God through personal decisions, through different dimension of existence. And he was actually most of his teachings were taken from Kabbalah, from the Zohar and the Kabbalah of Rabbi Yitzchak Luria. But what the Baal Shem Tov was doing, if Jewish mysticism was trying to understand God and the divine existence, Baal Shem Tov said, I would like to understand people, because we human beings were created in the image of God, and there's very little things we can say about God, but we need to understand ourselves. We need to understand how we act in the world, how we work. And I would even say, very, very carefully, but I think there's a lot of truth to that the Baal Shem Tov was probably the first a Jewish psychologist, way before Freud, at least 100 years before Freud. And he was trying to understand the nefesh. He was trying to understand human spirit, the human mind. Why do we do what we do? So that was one thing that he was trying to do. The other thing that he was trying to do, and that's very important, I'm just going to mention it and we're going to move away because it's not the focus of our discussion today. Baal Shem Tov was actually tilting the focal point in Judaism from learning Torah to praying. And he said, praying everyone can do. The way that what you know and with who you are, you can pray and you can connect to God. And there are a few, I would say, like 3 essential elements in the Baal Shem Tov's learning and teachings and behaving and being Jewish, and it was loving God, loving other Jews, and loving the Torah. And each one of us can do it in their own way. And it was a revolution. It was actually starting a revolution in being Jewish and understanding each and every one of us role in this world. You didn't have to be, the sharpest, the most smart person in the world in order to learn Torah. You can be very, very simple, and with your acts, be even a better Jew than the Rosh Yeshiva, for example. And of course, he influenced his followers. I'll just mention 2 names. One is his grandson, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, and the other one is one of his great students, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Ladi, the Baal HaTanya, the founder of the Chabad movement.
Yafit, in this wonderful introduction to the world of the Baal Shem Tov, I want to just point out one point that we touched upon 2 weeks ago in an episode with Yossi Ben Harush, where we spoke about much more modern Hasidic thought. But the fact is that Chassidut is such an appealing way of thinking in today's world, and there are a number of reasons why that's the case. There's always been Hasidim since Chassidut started and went into all these different branches and different chatzerot. But today you have just the, average Jew, observant Jew who's not particularly Hasidic or come from a Hasidic background is interested reading Chassidut. I right now have on my shelf, I'm reading Sipurei Maasiyot of Rabbi Nachman. I'm doing it just because everyone's reading it, so I gotta be up to date. Do you know what I'm saying? But it's really speaking to people's hearts and souls already for a number of decades in a much broader way. And I don't want to belabor the point, but the focus on the self, which in his time was a democratization of knowledge, meaning Judaism isn't about knowledge, it's about Avodat Hashem, which for some reasons, which I don't know the history of it, seem to have gotten lost over time, or certainly in Ashkenazic lands, that today, with the tremendous focus on self and self-improvement in the broader modern world, Chassidut has sort of come in fits like a glove, meaning this very introspective, what is my place in it? How can I wake up tomorrow morning and be a better person? Those kinds of, which also exist in the Musar movement, but exist in somewhat different forms in Chassidut, that way of thinking, that kind of language has just fallen upon such, desperate longing and thirsty souls in today's world. So it's exploded, and there's multiple historical reasons for why that is the case. But that's one that I'll just mention because you really spoke about that when you spoke about the fact that the Baal Shem Tov was really having the focus on the person. We're going to be, the first, as you said, the first Jewish psychologist. And that's what interests him is the human soul and how to touch that soul and not just the divine that feels far away.
Yes, he was so insightful by saying that if people will think they're worth nothing and they have nothing to contribute to the long Jewish learning tradition, then people will be drifted away from Yahadut, from Judaism, from belonging. And comes the Baal Shem Tov and he says, no, what you have personally is something only you can bring. And if you're not going to be you, the world is going to miss this special, unique thing that you can bring to the world. And with that, just letting people feel important, not egoistic, but important. I count.
He gave them self-worth, and that was
Absolutely.
something that was utterly missing in a world where you nullified yourself to the bigger people out there, to the huge God out there. He gave people self-worth. They were
Yes.
lacking. And also, we're not going to go into the history of it, but they were living in hundreds of years of horrific exile, meaning it wasn't just not great. I mean, it was horrific, bleak. There was nothing on the horizon that let you think that this was ever going to change. We're going to be sitting in a poor corner of the Ukraine for the next generations with pogroms constantly coming. We can never predict them. I mean, it's not even just self-worth. It's also giving them hope and then also in the wake of all the false messiahs that he also witnessed in his own life. But you only have false messiahs when people are desperate to be saved. And so it's all that. It's that self-worth and also giving people something to hold on to that I think he really gifted the Jewish world with.
I think you touched a very important word, and that's hope. Like Baal Shem Tov is telling not only that Jewish history has hope, our future has hope. And one of his sayings, which I think is absolutely deep, Baal Shem Tov is saying, the Pasuk in Noach, Sohar ta'aseh lateva. You should open a window in the teva for Noach, just to be able to see the outside. The Baal Shem Tov is saying teva in Hebrew is not just an ark, it's a word. And we should open windows in each and every word of the Torah. And with that, he opened a sea of interpretations to the Torah, saying each word has something to teach me. And I should open a window into that word and try to understand something deep about it in each and every word of the Torah. And all of a sudden we have Chassidut, and Baal Shem Tov started that, taking one word of the Torah and bringing, tens of ideas of not only understanding Torah, but mostly understanding myself. Because the most important thing, and I think it's an existential way of thinking. So, Sohar ta'aseh lateva, a window you should open into each word of the Torah. And looking into each word of the Torah, it's not just understanding what the Torah wants to tell me about what happened in the past, or what are the mitzvot. Looking into the words so I can understand how to live this life. Our parsha starts with 2 psukim. That, let me just say the psukim, and then I'll focus on the word that he is opening our eyes into. So these were the marches of the Israelites who started out from the land of Egypt, troop by troop, in the charge of Moshe and Aaron. And then it says, Moshe recorded the starting points of their various marches as directed by God. Their marches by starting points were as the follow. And the Baal Shem Tov looks at this pasuk, and it says, the Moshe has to write where they left their journey and where they're going, where the next step is. And the Baal Shem Tov is saying, I'm listening to these words of the Torah, lemotzaehem, where they left, what was the point, the traveling point they were at, and where they're going into. And the Baal Shem Tov is saying, this is very strange. Why does the Torah have to tell us that they left and they're going into the next stop, and then again where they got and where the next stop? And there's a list of 42 stations, 42 camping stops that Bnei Israel find themselves in the desert. Not all of them happened throughout the desert. There were 14 stops in the first year and 8 stops at the last year, meaning that there are 20 camping points that they stop at and camp at throughout 38 years. And that's a long time for just 20 stops, meaning that more time they spend sitting in one place than traveling to the other place. But the Baal Shem Tov is focusing on the number 42. And he's saying 42 stations, 42 stops that Bnei Israel traveled since they left Mitzrayim till they got to their destination, that was Eretz Israel. The Baal Shem Tov is saying something so profound, and he says each and every one of us has to go through 42 stops, 42 stations, 42 camping points in our life. We have to move from one point to another point till we accomplish our journey in our life. And the reason, says the Baal Shem Tov, is that each and every one of us has something to achieve throughout our life. And that achievement has to do with us being aware of our kochot, our strengths and our weaknesses. And every time we get to a point, we have to ask ourselves, what did I learn from that place, from that stop, from that, sitting here, dwelling in this place where I am? It could be a spiritual place, it could be a physical place, it could be an intersection in my life where I have to make decisions. What did I gain and learn from that point? And only then I can move to the next step in my life. And till we finish these 42 stops in our life, only then we are ready to move to the next life, says the Baal Shem Tov, the spiritual achievement of the next world. And says the Baal Shem Tov, the 42, the number 42, that's also a Kabbalistic idea of the number 42. Mm-hmm. It says the Baal Shem Tov, if I know in my life that there are certain stops that I have to move, certain places I have to be in order to accomplish what I can in my life, then maybe I'll live my life in a deeper awareness and try to understand where's the next step I should go. Now, it's a question all of us ask ourselves. How do I know where to go to from where I am? Shall I stay where I am and say, this is the only place I can be? I'm happy here. I make a living. My kids are happy. My spouse is happy. There's nowhere I can move into. I can move towards in my life. And the Baal Shem Tov says that's very dangerous. Wherever we are, if we're too happy, that means we're going to feel stagnation. Every time we stop in our life and we feel satisfied, that's where we have to think what's the next step should be. And it can be a spiritual step. It doesn't mean that I have to move to another country.
In his, if I'm looking at the text in front of me of the commentary, which I also think is interesting to note that a lot of these Torot, they're written by his son. Right? They always start with a quote.
There are two main people who wrote the Torot of Baal Shem Tov. One was his great Talmid, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef Katz from Poland. Mm-hmm. He wrote most of the things about the Baal Shem Tov. The other one was the Maggid of Mezerich, but he didn't write much. He just said all of the Torot that he learned with the Baal Shem Tov, and his students, the students of the Maggid, wrote the Torot. Rabbi Nachman quotes a lot of things by his from his grandfather.
Okay, so that's just a side point, but it's just when you look at the commentaries, everyone should just note that it's usually Shamati B'Shem, but it's speaking about I heard in the name of it, speaking about the Baal Shem Tov.
Right.
So I'm just curious about how to take this metaphor, because he says, I'm just reading one line, that Kol HaMasa'ot hayu membet, there were 42 Masa'ot, והם אצל כל אדם מיום היוולדו עד שבו אל עולמו, ולהבין זה כי מיום הלידה והוצאתו מרחם אמו הוא בחינת יציאת מצרים כנודע. It says that, as you just explained before, that when you're born and until you go into the next world, it's basically you're going through 42, stopping points along the way. And it's like you've exited Egypt until you get to the next world. Now, the starting point from Egypt is something that sort of caught my eye. Meaning, I know that that's what it says in the Psukim, but if we're taking it metaphorically as being about the journeys that our life are, the journeys we take in our life to become better, more meaningful people, the starting point from Egypt kind of bothered me. Do you know what I'm saying? Meaning, yes. It's a very negative perspective. Maybe it doesn't mean it negatively; it just means starting low and getting to a high point. But maybe because he was comparing the womb to Mitzrayim.
Exactly. So he's talking about the word Mitzrayim, and he's actually reading it as Meitzarim, a narrow place. Okay. And we exit Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim was a narrow place, a place we didn't have room, metaphorically, to live, to be. And then we enter through Kriyat Yam Suf. Actually, there's a scholar, Professor Ilana Pardes from Hebrew U, and she has a beautiful book about Yetziat Mitzrayim, and she says the people of Israel actually are reborn because they leave Mitzrayim, which is a narrow place, through water, Kriyat Yam Suf, and then they birth is starting at the other side of Yam Suf, and they start their lives, and they have to learn how to be people, how to walk, how to talk, how to eat. It's really a beautiful metaphor. This is what the Baal Shem Tov is saying. Each and every one of us come out from our mother's tomb and into the life, into this world. And this world is full of difficulties and challenges. And we have to, when we understand that we came here to go through a journey, to grow, not to stay in one place, then each time we stop, we have to think, okay, what's my next step? Where else can I grow? Where else can I go? Where else can I bring the gifts I was given by God?
Which is the Torah, essentially?
It's not only the Torah. I think that's his main chidush. It's not only my divrei Torah. It's me as a person in this world with my own neshama. I am unique. The Baal Shem Tov is emphasizing on the fact that each and every one of us is unique. So if I understand that my life from the minute I was born to the minute I'll die is unique to me, and there's something I need to bring to this world, because no one else will bring the same words, the same sound, the same being, the same emphasis. And I have to navigate, throughout the journey of my life, so I can bring to the world what I can do. Now, each person has their own journey. One is a poet, one is a writer, one is a Torah scholar, one is a mother, one is a politician, one is a judge. It doesn't matter. All those things are from God that were given to me for me to find out throughout the journey of my life. And if I'm aware of the fact that, you know what, let me use someone who is not Hasidic, but maybe it will help us understand. Rav Soloveitchik was saying that there are only two things we know in this world. We know that we were born, and we know that we are going to die. And between those 2 points, what I do in the world is most of the things are based on my decisions, on where bechira chofshit, where I'm taking my life. The Baal Shem Tov is adding something else. And again, he's reading into the Torah, and he's saying, why would Moshe have to write down all the 42 Masaot? Why not just saying, we left Mitzrayim, we entered the land. Why do I have to hear about the 42 stations, 42 stops? And the Baal Shem Tov is saying it's important because Moshe is hinting us, is teaching us that Kamo, as Bnei Israel had to go through 42 stops after they left Mitzrayim, they left the narrow place, they were reborn and till they enter the promised land. This is our journey in this life. And if we focus on that, if we understand that, that will help us move from one stop to another, trying to grow, trying to understand, learning. Now, another thing, you mentioned hope before, and that was something very big with the Baal Shem Tov. And he says, sometimes we get to a place and we feel despair. We feel like we lost hope. There's no hope for me. There's nowhere I can move on from this point. I'm lost. And the Baal Shem Tov is saying, no. Because if I don't know where to go next, I should look around myself and ask myself, what did I learn from this stop where I am? What did I learn from life till now? And from that learning, I can get to a conclusion where my next step should be. And every step, every point is important. You know what? There's another thing which I think is so crucial in what he's saying. He's using a phrase saying, gadlut vekatnut. Narrow mind and big mind, small points and large points in our life, which is also a major concept in Chassidut and also in the Zohar. But the Baal Shem Tov is saying, sometimes we reach a point in our life, one stop of our life, which we feel it's enormous, it's great. I accomplished something really great. It can be, the day of our marriage. It can be, I got an appointment. I feel important. I feel I did something great in my life. And we feel sometimes that these are the highlights of our lives. But the Baal Shem Tov is saying, no, sometimes even the small things that we do in our life can be one step ahead, one step towards the goal, the mission of our life. It can be, just waking up in the morning, tired and making a sandwich to our kid. And I don't regard it as an important step in my life, but no, I accomplished something there. I overcome my tiredness, to help my child. I smiled to the person in the street. That could also be a small step in my life that brings me forward as a human being that was created in the image of God, that is trying to reach something more than just everyday life. That specific understanding of the Baal Shem Tov of Parashat Mas'eh is just one example to the revolution. It's just one example for the revolution that his teachings brought to the Jewish world. And it is to tell each and every one of us, our life is written in the Torah. And if I put on existential glasses to read the Torah, I can find hints, I can find advice, I can find ways of giving me tools for how to live my life in a better way. Not so I'll be happy all the time, but mostly of overcoming suffering and anxiety and poorness. And what he's telling us in the specific words of Mas'eh, with the 42 steps that each and every one of us is going through, that he says, if we look into ourselves, we will find that everything that happened to us brought us to a certain point, and from that point on, we can move on to the next step. Sometimes what happens to us bring us to grow spiritually, and sometimes what happened to us brings us to grow, from things that we do outside, things that the entire world can see, that we change or we moved into the target. And maybe that will teach other people not to give up, but to pursue that we brought to do in this world, each and every one of us with our own specific abilities and tasks and our neshama that we bring into this world. So Baal Shem Tov really started a movement, and both his students and his grandchildren continued to develop his teachings and his ideas. Now, most people are aware of his grandson, Rabbi Nachman Mibreslav, but he had another grandson who had an amazing commentary on Torah. His name was Moshe Chaim Ephraim, and he wrote a book called Degel Machane Ephraim. Mm-hmm. And the Degel Machane Ephraim, about this learning of Mas'eh and the stops and the stopping points in the journey of our life, is saying something also very, very profound. And he says, when the Torah tell us lemotzaehem mimasa'ehem, in other words, where they left and where they're going to. And the Degel Machane Ephraim says that if we focus in our life on the roots of our lives, where the first station, where are we coming from? Where are we coming from to go to the rest of our lives? And always remember the source. Looking back, where did I come from? That will give me koach, that will give me strength to move on in our life. And essentially, says the Degel Machane Ephraim, when we remember where we came from, and here again, it's two readings. Where we came from can be our root, our neshama from God, or where we came from, our family, what we got from our family. Then every struggle that I have in life, I can look back and it's like, no, but I have a good foundation. I have where to draw my koach, my strength to move on in life. That's if we're thinking about our family. Sometimes when we look back and we say, no, but my family actually didn't give me koach. Maybe sometimes my family weakened me. And the Degel Machane Ephraim says, nevertheless, if you look back and you see that your family weakened you, you can say, I want to be stronger. I want to give my kids something different. And then, start a journey which is different than where I started. And if it's remembering my source, my neshama from God, that definitely should give me koach, because if God decided that I need to come to this world, this is something that the Baal Shem Tov said, you were born, that means you have something to contribute to this world. And remembering your source is supposed to give you the energy and the wisdom to move on through life.
First of all, Yafit, thank you so much for this conversation. I think that the ideas you've been sharing in the name of these Hasidic masters has really beautifully demonstrated why Hasidut is speaking to so many people now. It's very interesting because I think one of the major differences between the world in which Hasidut came to be and our world is that then there are many things that were externally creating tsa'al for people, that were externally creating anguish and pain, pogroms and poverty, and as we said, just hundreds of years of galut, of exile. And then this Torah came to be in a world where it gave people self-worth, and it reminded them that you can use Torah to be your anchor for strength in life and not just to be something that's another heavy yoke that sits upon you and makes things difficult. In our world today, the externalities of our life are better than they ever were in the history of the world. There is war, obviously, still, but the life we meet every day is far more peaceful inside and out than it ever used to be. But the irony is that with all of that, the recreational time or the peace that is on the outside, people's souls today are more in anguish than ever for so many different reasons. And so I think that while there's been a flip in where the anguish or pain comes from, either way, the world of Chassidut is falling on souls, on hearts, and on ears that really need it. And the big difference between the world of Chassidut and the world of self-help is that self-help is what it sounds like. It's finding the resources within yourself, whereas Chassidut focuses on the self, but it uses it through the tools of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and of Torah. And so it's not that the buck ends with me and what I could do for myself, or that the hired help I could pay for, or the spa treatment I can give to myself. It's not about from within you. It's about using the things that God has given you and then using what God in the Torah has put in this world. So I just want to thank you very much for that and for giving all of us insight into the early world of Chassidut.
Thank you, Yosefa. And I think what you said now is so true and so deep. People are looking for meaning, and Baal Shem Tov and Chassidut are giving meaning which comes from inside.
Thank you for joining us for these episodes on the Book of Bamidbar. We've journeyed together along with the Jewish people in the desert, and we've had the pleasure of hearing from such a plethora of interesting, enlightening, and moving guests. Stay tuned for a fabulous Dvarim lineup. I'm excited to bring you several returning guests as well as many new ones. See you there, and Shabbat Shalom. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I'm Dr. Yosefa Fogel-Rubel, and this is One-on-One Women Talk Torah, a series brought to you by Matan Women's Institute for Torah Study. Please do One-on-One and Women's Torah Learning a small favor by sharing this podcast with family and friends so that we can reach new listeners. You can stream and download these episodes on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, and Matan's website. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review in the comments. Please send us any feedback at podcast@matan.org.il. That's podcast@matan.org.il. Thanks for listening, everyone.